I noticed in my last video I smacked my lips a lot, like going, which I thought was kind of annoying. My last video was Spider-Man. I'm just saying that in case like a few years down the line somebody's watching this video, so they're not going to know like what my previous video was. So yeah, I just noticed I smacked my lips a lot, and that was kind of annoying. Like even when I was just watching my review back, and I was kind of like, you really, just stop it. I was getting pretty irritated by that myself. I'm not sure if anyone else picked up on that. It wasn't a conscious decision or anything like that. It's just something like I just kind of did automatically. Hopefully I won't do it much this time. Let's hope. So the story of Spider-Man 2, it's not really much to say. I mean, it's a sequel to Spider-Man, so Spider-Man continues being Spider-Man and fights crime. Like, that's really all I can say. The new super villain on the scene this time, we had the Green Goblin last time. So this time it's Dr. Octavius. It's the scientist guy who wants to create a new energy source. He's kind of creating like a mini sun. It's like this really expensive experiment to set up, but it can end up creating an energy source which is like renewable or something like that, I think. But basically it'll make Oscorp a lot of money since Harry is funding the like little test run. But so the experiment goes wrong, and it basically ends with him having these 4 mechanical arms like coming out of his back, like these 4 mechanical tentacle kind of things. I don't even know why I'm describing this. Everybody knows who Doc Ock is. I mean, even if you haven't seen Spider-Man 2, I mean, most people have. It's a pretty like common movie, I guess, which people have seen. But even if you haven't seen it, everybody knows what this guy looks like. It's just some guy with 4 mechanical like tentacles coming out like of his back. So basically, he's the new supervillain, and the movie is Spider-Man trying to take him down. So I think I just smacked my lips there. Okay. So on to the movie. I do like this movie. It's great. It's a hell of a lot better than the first Spider-Man, in my opinion. I think, yeah, it's better than Spider-Man 3 as well. I would say this is the best of the Sam Raimi trilogy. So what can I say about it? We get a lot more insight into Peter Parker's life, like his personal life this time around. In the first film, sure, we got to see him deal with like Uncle Ben's death, that sort of stuff. But it wasn't much of a focus on his personal life. But this film focuses a hell of a lot more on his personal life, as opposed to the Spider-Man persona. And it's more interesting this time around. Like, we get to see him attempting to like juggle his social life as well as being Spider-Man. Like, he misses Mary Jane's play because he's busy fighting crime. And the obnoxious usher doesn't let him in, who is played by Bruce Campbell. He was great in that part. He was only in that one scene, but he was great there. He was fun. This time round we get a lot less goofy moments, let's say. Like, the first film was it had like a lot of cheesy moments. This film isn't anywhere near as silly or cheesy, I guess. It's kind of it's more serious, I would say, in my opinion. There's not as much like stupid jokes or anything like that, or like cheesy lines like "We'll meet again, Spider-Man," that sort of stuff. Doc Ock is a great villain. He's physically threatening, and I don't know who plays him, but he does a fine job. And he's just like, he is a good villain. He's physically threatening. One thing I didn't, his character is played more seriously than the Green Goblin, so you don't get much cheesy lines from him, or at least the lines which were kind of like supposed to be jokes or whatnot. I can't really think of any at the top of my head, but the ones that were supposed to be like jokes or kind of fun, they weren't like too cheesy or anything. They were bearable, and you could still take the movie kind of seriously. And like, the only line I didn't like from him was Butterfingers. He says Butterfingers when he drops Aunt May off a building. Aside from that, I think his character is played pretty seriously, if I remember right. And even when he is Spider-Man, kind of he says something like, "You're starting to get on my nerves," and then he says something like, "I have a knack for that," and then he goes, "No anymore," and then he starts to crush his skull. That line, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be cheesy or anything like that, but I like that. Like, the way the two characters saying that. I thought it was great. It kind of felt natural to the scene and everything. So this time around, you don't get much like cheesy moments like that. One moment I really didn't like, which involved Doc Ock, was when he's in that abandoned warehouse in his lair, like kind of I think, oh god, I keep smacking my lips. But when he's in that warehouse and he's kind of recounting what the hell just happened. Like, this is as he's becoming the villain of the movie. He's just standing there, he's like, there's voices in my head. The inhibitor chip. Like, he kind of talks to himself a little bit. Apparently these claws are kind of speaking to him, which I didn't really buy. I wasn't a fan of that idea. But he's kind of speaking to himself in this warehouse, and I didn't like that. The thing is with the Green Goblin's cheesy lines in the first film, they were like they were fun. If you were in the right mindset, you could have fun with those lines and just laugh along with them because of how ridiculous or just silly they are. But this wasn't the good kind of cheesy. The line, like him speaking to himself in the warehouse, was kind of awkward to watch. It just felt awkward and is like embarrassing to listen to. I really don't like that when he's speaking to himself there. But aside from that, his character, as far as I can remember, aside from that one part, his character doesn't have any other cheesy moments. It's, you know, it's just great fun. The action scenes this time around are a hell of a lot more thought out, I guess I would say. In the first film, when the Green Goblin and Spider-Man fought directly, as in hand-to-hand combat, they just, for the most part, they just punch each other in the face. Or like Spider-Man shoots his web at the Green Goblin. That's pretty much it. Like, you do get the one scene where Green Goblin throws those like little flying bat blade things which chase Spider-Man in the burning building. But aside from that, for the most part, they're just punching each other in the face when they fight directly. This time around, it's a bit more varied in the fights, and it's a lot more entertaining. It's like they're more planned out, or like more well thought out, I guess I would say. And as opposed to the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, when they fought directly, they were just fighting on the ground, like punching each other in the face. Like, I don't count the bridge scene as a fight. Like, Spider-Man's trying to save the children and Mary Jane, but he's not actually fighting the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin's kind of just there, making it more difficult for him. But when they're inside that like little abandoned building at the end, and when they are fighting for like 5 seconds at the party on the floor, and also when they're in the burning building, that's when they're fighting directly, like hand to hand. With Spider-Man and Doc Ock, when they fight directly, it's not always on the ground. In fact, it's rarely on the ground. I think there's only 2 moments where they're fighting on the ground, like once is in the bank, one's at the end in the warehouse. And the other times they fight, it's kind of like a different scenario. For example, I think I smacked my lips again, that's getting annoying. For example, a lot of the time or at least 2 or 3 times I think, they fight on the side of buildings. Like, Doc Ock uses his claws to kind of like climb like along the buildings, and Spider-Man and him fight each other. So I thought that was great fun. And in one of the fight scenes, because he holds Aunt May hostage, so Spider-Man has to worry about saving her as well as fighting him at the same time, as opposed to the Green Goblin situation where Spider-Man was worrying about saving Mary Jane and the children at, you know, on the bridge scene. But he wasn't really fighting the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin was just there, making it more difficult for him, as opposed to Doc Ock and Spider-Man on the building while trying to save Aunt May. Because there's a good mix-up of Spider-Man trying to save Aunt May, and there's still a fair amount of fighting with Spider-Man and Doc Ock for it to be considered like an actual direct fight, like a direct confrontation, I guess. So the fights take place in different situations, like on the side of buildings, on top of a subway. Well, I mean, like on top of a train. Like, that train scene is great as well. And also, the way they fight, it's not just like punching each other in the face either. It's a bit different. Like, they're falling off the building as they fight each other, and eventually they like grab on. Spider-Man, like, there's a massive chunk of concrete falling off the building, and Spider-Man like uses his web to catch it, and then he flings it back up with Doc Ock and hits him in the face. That sort of stuff is great. It's like the environment is involved in the fight, so it's not just them punching each other in the face. The fights are a bit more varied, and there's a bit more stuff going on, and the way they attack each other is more varied as well. It's not just punches after punches. While as opposed to the Green Goblin, they were just pretty much just punching each other with the occasional use of the web, and also, of course, the Green Goblin used those flying bat blade things on Spider-Man in the burning building scene. So this time around, the fight scenes are a lot more entertaining because they're more varied. Let's say that the special effects are great. The arms coming from Doc Ock, they look real in my opinion. Well, not real. I mean, yeah, sure, you can tell the CGI, but it's great CGI that you can kind of like get immersed into the film, and you don't really think about the clothes. You kind of see them as like real things. There's only one shot in the whole entire film where I felt as if the clothes kind of looked a bit fake, and that was when the shards of glass were flying at Doc Ock, and then he kind of wraps himself with the clothes to shield himself from the shards of glass. That's the only part of the film where I felt as if the clothes looked a bit fake. Aside from that, they, as far as I'm concerned, they looked real enough. They were great. Spider-Man, oh, I think I smacked my lips again. Spider-Man go swinging through the buildings, you know, through New York. That looked great. It looked good in the first film as well, I thought. It looked fine in the first film. In this one, it looks even better. But I will say in the first film, they still looked good, him swinging through the city, but it does look a bit better in this film. Either way, it looks great anyway. The only part of the film where I felt as if the special effects were pretty bad was when the shards of glass fly at Doc Ock's wife. It's like they all CGI and it just doesn't look good. I didn't like that bit. What else is there? The subplots is something I really didn't like. There's a subplot about Spider-Man kind of like losing his powers. He just can't use his powers, so he can't shoot the web out of his wrist and he can't climb on buildings. It just is, there's like brief moments where he can't do that stuff. I personally felt as if I just wasn't a fan of that subplot. It doesn't really go anywhere, and it doesn't really make it doesn't make a lot of sense. They don't really explain it too well. They just don't explain why he was losing his powers too well, in my opinion. They try to make it seem as if, well, you just don't want to be Spider-Man, I guess. Subconsciously you don't want to be Spider-Man. I don't know, I just didn't really buy it. I wasn't a fan of that subplot. It's a good idea, him kind of like losing his powers temporarily or something like that, and him trying to figure out why am I losing my powers and trying to get him back. That idea is great. I like that idea, but the way it was handled in the film, I don't think they handled it too well. Like, they didn't give a good enough explanation. I just didn't buy it. The acting is fine as far as I'm concerned. It's all good. Everyone does a good job, I guess. There's not really a spot of bad acting or anything like that. It's all fine. What else? I'm not quite sure what else to say from here. Yeah, the humour in this film is something I can talk about. It's a hell of a lot better than the first film. A lot of the jokes in the first film, they just fell flat on their face, or they were like cheesy. So you could have fun with them because they were cheesy. This film, I felt as if it was played a lot more seriously than the first film. And the jokes work better than the first film. There's one or two of them which I was kind of like, no, doesn't work. For me at least. But for the most part, the jokes are a lot better, and the humour's it's more enjoyable. It's less cheesy. It's a lot better in this film, basically. John Jameson, I think he's played by John Simmons. You know, the newspaper editor, the owner of the Daily Bugle, Peter's boss. He's back again. He's as awesome as ever. I always like any scene with him is just entertaining, and the actor's great. He's so over the top. You know, I said the same thing in the first Spider-Man review. He's just as fun as ever. They introduce a new character in this film, the Rent guy. So this time around, Peter is living in like an apartment in New York, in the actual city now, as opposed to living with his Aunt May. And there's this guy who keeps nagging him for rent, and it's just that he just pops up throughout the film several times, and he's kind of just nagging him for rent. And I just liked that guy. That guy was just fun. He's like the equal to John Jameson. Not as awesome as John Jameson, but he's still a cool guy. He's a fun character. I like the humour with his character. Then we have what about the kids? Like the goofy moments. Let's go back to them. Peter, he's on his like scooter thing going down the road, and then these criminals in a car come up behind him to hit him. He does like a backflip off his scooter and lands behind the car. And then these two kids are like, "Whoa, how'd you do that?" And he's like, just eat your greens, eat your vegetables. He just says something like that, and then the kids are like, my mom always used to tell me that, I just never believed her. And I'm not sure what to think of that. Like, they have one or two goofy moments like that, but I'm not quite sure what to think of it. It's not my kind of humour, but whether or not it pissed me off, I'm not quite sure. Like, there's a part of me saying, no, that sucked, and then there's another part of me saying, oh, that was cute, I guess. I'm not quite sure what to think of that sort of stuff, but it didn't bother me, like, majorly or anything. So yeah, the humour, it's a lot better this time around. What else? What other things? This is one thing which kind of bothered me about the film. Doc Ock himself, he's a cool villain and everything. Like, he just looks cool. The claws, it's an awesome idea. I dig it, and it makes for like some great fight scenes. I'm not too sure about the science behind the claws. The claws were designed to help him build the experiment, like build this renewable energy source, like construct the device used to generate the energy, I guess. That was the purpose of the claws, and the claws have been fitted with some sort of artificial intelligence, a little bit of AI. And I just wasn't too sure on the science behind these claws, and I didn't buy it. Like, it's a movie, so just whatever, just go. I just went with it. I mean, it's Spider-Man anyway, so I just went with it. So I was like, you know, whatever. But if I try to think of it seriously, I'm kind of like, I'm not quite sure what the deal with these claws are. It's like they can speak to him. It seems as if they have their own consciousness. It's almost like I just can't. When films do that sort of stuff, I just find it difficult to kind of go along with it. But with this, I was like, okay, just ignore it, whatever. Just basically, I didn't buy the claws. Like the claws, this AI being advanced enough to kind of manipulate Doc Ock into doing their bidding. Like, I guess they control themselves and they allowed Doc Ock to control them as soon as they realised he was on their side, I guess. But I'm not quite sure. I was kind of confused about the science behind the AI of the claws, and I wasn't a big fan of that one chip on the back of his spine kind of being the one thing stopping the claws from taking over him. And the claws just taking over him in general. I just find it difficult to kind of comprehend this. I just don't understand how exactly this works. But I don't care. Like, I just went along with the movie. It's not a major complaint or anything. Like, I still dig him as a villain. He's still great fun. It's just a little thing I wasn't too sure of. But like I said, whatever. I don't care. The film has a few moments which just don't make sense in general. I'll get into a few of them in the spoiler section of the review. But for example, the claws, he has like a metal thing going down his spine which the claws are attached to. And attached to this metal thing going down his spine are a bunch of needles. They kind of they get like embedded into his spinal cord. Like, they all like jut into his spine. A lot, like, they all along the plate, and then when he activates the claws, the needles like jut into his spine. It's just, he's facing an audience, like, you know, he's like, check out my claws, showing them off and stuff to this crowd, and the crowd are just standing there and they all go ooh when all of the needles get injected into his spine. I'm just saying, how did they see the needles going to his spine? They all looking at him from the front. There's no one behind him, so how did they why did they react to the needles going into his spine if they didn't see it? I don't know, it's just like a little moment where I was kind of like, what? You know? Also, this is like, the film has a few things like that. Like, I'm not quite sure how exactly Doc Ock got back to his lair without the police following him. I mean, I'm pretty sure they would have had some helicopters on the scene to follow him. I know he had Aunt May. Some people might be getting confused with this, because he says, don't follow me, when he has Aunt May. But Spider-Man saves Aunt May and gets her away from him. So the police could have followed him after Spider-Man saved Aunt May. So I just didn't buy how no one managed to deduce where his warehouse was. But again, it's just like a small complaint. I just went along with the movie. Just like things like that, I just ignored. I didn't care. I just went along. But if you want to be extremely critical, I'm just throwing out one or two things like that. There was something else, I can't remember what it was now. The relationship between the characters is interesting to watch because of what happened at the end of Spider-Man 1. The relationship between Harry and Peter is interesting to watch. I'm just going to throw this out there. I haven't read any of the comics, so I mentioned this in my first Spider-Man review, but if you haven't seen that review, I'm just setting the record straight. I haven't read any of the comics. I can't remember barely anything about the TV show, the cartoon TV show. So any of these storylines, if they were like ripped from the comics, I have no idea. Or if they're like new storylines or just changed a little bit, I have no idea. But I did like the relationship between Harry and Peter in this one. It was interesting to watch. And the way this movie ends in just a cool way, where it does make you excited for Spider-Man 3 because of all of the way the characters... like, I can't say anything because of spoilers, but basically all of the relationship between all of the characters is changed. When this movie ends, it doesn't just go back to the way it was before this supervillain decided to screw some stuff up in the city. It doesn't go back to the way that things were. Things have changed in these characters' lives, which I thought was good. I liked how they didn't just end with everything going back to the way it was. Like, things have changed, and it sets up Spider-Man 3 really well, I felt. And like, when Spider-Man 2 ended, and I watched this in the cinemas, and it ended back in 2000 and whatever, I couldn't wait for Spider-Man 3. I felt as if it was a great cliffhanger. I didn't like the resolution to the story. I felt as if it was a Deus Ex Machina. I think I pronounced that right. I just felt as if it was a pretty big Deus Ex Machina. I'll clarify what I thought was the Deus Ex Machina in the spoiler section of the review. I didn't like it, how they resolved the story. Like I said, I'll get into that later. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, okay, two last things. There's one scene which I thought was pretty off-key for Spider-Man. The whole entire film is pretty light-hearted. Like, it takes itself more seriously than the first film. But even then, it's still kind of light-hearted for the most part. But there was this one scene which was straight out of a horror film. There's no blood or anything, but what happens and what is implied, I thought it was kind of gruesome. Like, well, not gruesome, but like disturbing or violent or dark for a Spider-Man film. And the scene I'm talking about, and I know a lot of people agree with me on this, like some people do, I have heard a few people mention this. It's the scene where Doc Ock wakes up. He goes unconscious, and then when he wakes up, the claws, like, the doctors are gonna remove the claws from his body, and it's like, I guess the claws are like self-conscious, so I don't know, maybe Doc Ock is awake at this point, so he decides to stop them because he wants the claws for some reason. I don't know, but the claws basically attack the hospital staff when they try to remove them, and it's just the way the scene is directed, and there's no music at all, and like everyone's like screaming and everything. It's just really dark, and I was kind of like, whoa, okay. It's just really dark for a Spider-Man film. Like, it's just no music, the way everyone's screaming, the guy grabbing, you know, desperately trying to reach the chainsaw, and all of the claws, like they're throwing people through windows, slamming against people's heads, throwing people against walls, and like, you know, through walls in some cases. I just thought that scene was pretty dark. It was kind of violent, I guess. I don't know. That scene was kind of horror-ish, I guess. Okay, so on to the final thing. This isn't actually like about the movie. Well, it's about the movie, but it's not like a critical thing about the movie or anything. It's just Marcy from American Horror Story Series 1 appears at the end of this movie for like 5 seconds. She appears in like one shot and she has one line, and I just kind of like freaked out. I was like, oh my god, it's Marcy from American Horror Story. I was just kind of surprised to see her there. Of course I didn't pick up on on the fact that it's her when I first watched this film, because American Horror Story didn't exist back then, but just rewatching it like now, like a few days ago, and after watching it, you know, since American Horror Stories now, I was kind of like, oh wow, Marcy. I was like, so it was cool to see her. This is honestly the last thing before the spoiler section of the review now. In the first film, there's a few moments where Spider-Man gets hit, and it doesn't make sense. Like, he turns his back to Bonesaw in the wrestling arena, and just blatantly allows him to hit him with a steel chair several times. And it's established that he has spider sense. He can anticipate attacks coming from behind him. So there's like a few moments in the film where he gets hit by people from behind, and it just doesn't make sense, because with the reflexes and the fact that he has spider sense, and you know, the reflexes he has, why it just doesn't make sense for him to get hit sometimes when he so easily could have dodged, you know, the person trying to hit him. This film doesn't have any moments like that at all, as far as I can remember at least. It doesn't have any moments at all, and I just thought that I was happy with that. I just liked that they kind of stuck true to the spider sense. So when Spider-Man does get punched or whatever, it makes sense as to why he got punched. And I think, yeah, that's it. So it's a great movie. I do really like it. I would go as far as to say it's a great movie. Hell of a lot better than the first film, although I did like the first film, but it's a lot better than the first film. There's a great cliffhanger which makes you excited to see the third film. And there's a great shock moment towards the end when something happens in the story as well. Doc Ock is a cool villain, special effects are awesome. We get more of an insight on Peter's personal life, but it's a lot more interesting this time round. The humour is a lot better than the first film. There's less cheesy moments. It takes itself a bit more seriously. The fight scenes are fantastic, a bit more varied than the first film, since you got fight scenes taking place vertically, like on the side of buildings, on top of a train. It's a lot more fun to watch this time round. And I guess that's all I have to say. It's just a really entertaining movie. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. Although most people have by now. So I'm going to go into spoilers here. So if somehow you haven't seen this movie, and it's by now, so leave if you don't want spoilers. So here we go. The Deus Ex Machina, which I'm referring to, is how Doc Ock, like at the end, Spider-Man and him have like a 5-second fight or something. Short but sweet, I would say. And then Peter takes off his mask and he reveals himself. He's like, how do we stop this machine? It's going to tear apart the city. You gotta snap out of it. You can't let these claws control you. And then Doc Ock he just suddenly has power over these claws. I didn't like it. I just didn't like that he suddenly turned into the good guy. He suddenly found the strength within him. Like he finally found the inner strength within him to overcome the power of the claws and take control over them again. I just didn't like that. I guess you could say because he got electrocuted when Spider-Man tricked him into stabbing like the electrical wires, so he got electrocuted. So I guess you could say the claws were weakened, I guess, because he was electrocuted or something, I guess. But I don't know, I just didn't buy it. I wasn't a fan with how he just suddenly became good and managed to overcome the influence of the claws. I wasn't a fan of that, but it didn't ruin the movie or anything. It didn't piss me off or anything. All that, but I didn't like it. But yeah, whatever. Like I was fine with it in the end. And the great shock moment where like that kind of made me gasp was when Harry takes off the mask and finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. I thought that was a great moment, and then him seeing his father in the mirror, and then he finds the Green Goblin like equipment behind the mirror. I thought all of that. I thought that was a great scene, and so it's like I couldn't wait to see the third movie after watching that in the cinemas. Just knowing that Harry's like made out to be the villain in the third film, after what happens at the end of the second film. I thought it's a great cliffhanger. I felt. I think that's it. Oh yeah, one last thing which I thought was kind of dumb from Doc Ock. So if you haven't seen the movie, Doc Ock needs this thing. It's like the tritium or trinium. I can't remember what it was. I know how to pronounce it. I just don't know what the word was. It's something along the lines of tritium maybe. I think it might be that. But it's basically this really rare material which he needs for his experiment. And Harry, he's like the only person who has it. So he goes to Harry and he's like, I want the tritium. So they make a deal. He's like, bring Spider-Man to me and you can have it. And he's like, so Doc Ock's like, okay, so how do I find Spider-Man? And then he says, go to Peter Parker. He takes his pictures. I'm sure he can tell you where he is. And then, so Doc Ock goes to find Peter, and this is what I thought was kind of stupid. He throws, like, so Peter, as far as he knows, is his only way of getting to Spider-Man. And so this is what he thinks is the best idea to do. So Peter's sitting in the cafe at the time with Mary Jane talking to her. He's just sitting there at the table by the window. Doc Ock somehow gets the brilliant idea that the best way to get information from Peter Parker to find out where Spider-Man is by throwing a car through the window and potentially killing Pete. That just doesn't make sense. Of course Peter is Spider-Man, so he had the reflexes to dodge that. But I'm just saying, Doc Ock obviously didn't know that, and had Peter not dodged it, he would have been killed, and Doc Ock would have been screwed. Like, how would he find Spider-Man then? Well, that's the point, he wouldn't have, so he wouldn't have been able to get the tritium. I just thought that was kind of dumb. That's all I have to say about the spoiler section of my Spider-Man review, I guess. So yeah, it's a great movie, and that's really all I have to say. So, thanks for watching the review. On to Spider-Man 3 now, I guess, so see ya.